So I feel like there's just something happening where people's anxiety is super heightened and people are just really feeling very stressed. Their nervous systems are just going completely haywire. So I'm just wondering about your thoughts on like why that's happening and what is happening physiologically inside of us when that's happening to us.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And of course, the answer is highly complex and very multifactorial. But I think the biggest thing I can say is that our nervous systems are more taxed and overburdened now than they ever have been in all of human history because of all of the stress and pressure being placed on us constantly.
Yeah.
And where that comes from, I think in large part is technology and the fact that we are essentially expected to keep up with machines that are moving way faster than we're possibly ever going to, or at least in the foreseeable future. And if we're not keeping up with these completely unreasonable expectations and deadlines, then we feel like we're constantly behind. And that puts a huge burden on our stress mechanisms and our fight or flight, our sympathetic overload, we're just in sympathetic overload all the time, constantly running, constantly feeling behind, running through traffic, running from this to that, feeling frazzled, feeling overwhelmed, never having enough time, never feeling like we can keep up because we can't. We actually can't keep up with the demands of modern life. And unless you're privileged enough to be able to create a low-key life for yourself and still be able to sustain your lifestyle, then we're all in this rat race. On top of it, we're being inundated on all sides by various, this is a highly contentious subject, but EMFs, all of these frequencies that are hitting our nervous systems all the time. And the reason I say that is that there is data that especially developing nervous systems, so babies, puppies, any animal that's growing, gestating or growing, is if there are much higher rates of central nervous system cancers in children who live right next to very large cell phone towers. Now, as adults, our brains are not developing, and so we are not as prone to those effects because the cells aren't replicating like in infants, etc. But that's very well established. It was only in the last maybe 10 years that the number one childhood cancer changed from lymphoma and leukemias, so blood cancers, to brain cancers. And now that's number one. And it is thought because of the fact that now we're not talking about just ambient when you're just sitting around and there's EMFs. I mean, like really being next to a large tower that is established that it can cause these issues. So there's something happening clearly with all of these things, is it? And I think it just contributes to that frazzled sense of overwhelm. And on top of it, of course, we're completely detached from nature and from the circadian rhythm of nature, from the light dark cycle. We have screens, blue light in our faces all the time. That's disrupting the melatonin secretion of our pineal gland, which is in your brain. It's a neuroendocrine gland. And that regulates really the rest of your hormonal system. We have all sorts of other variables, like toxic compounds, persistent organic pollutants of all types, so all sorts of toxic compounds in our environment, whether they be pesticides, fungicides, various plastics and plasticizers, all of these things that are disrupting our hormonal system and also our nervous system. So we're just the onslaught, of course, heavy metals, all these things. So the onslaught of all of that on our body, on our nervous system that's already overstressed, overtaxed, overburdened, lack of sleep, lack of healthy food, not getting enough micronutrients, not eating on a schedule. Like we're just so far removed from how our bodies evolved in nature. Like really our bodies want to be how we were 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 years ago and 10,000 years ago. And here we are basically trying to operate like robots as fast as we can. We actually physically can't keep up. We have not evolved nearly as quickly as technology has. We're not able to. It takes evolution, takes, millennia. And yet we're expected to keep up with these unrealistic expectations on top of constantly being overburdened and overtaxed. So there's just people say all the time, well, we're built for stress. Like we shouldn't need to take or do anything because we're just made to handle it. It's like we are not made to handle the amount.
I think you're breaking up. We're not made to handle the amount of what?
The amount of stress that we're faced with every single day. We just can't do it.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like we're basically just living in a perfect storm of like nervous system frazzledness.
Exactly.
Okay. So then I'm curious, like wait, let me just